Next on Max TV, we take a look back at Bradley Campbell, and we have a bevy of news and notes coming up on the next round. And welcome to the next round. Steve Kim joined as always by Gabriel Montoya. A jam-packed show. We begin round number 1 from the Agua Caliente Casino in Rancho Mirage, California. It was showtime for the WBO Junior Welterweight title of the world. Tim Bradley with a TKO in 3 over Nate Campbell. And the night kicked off with the vacant WBC Junior Welterweight Championship, captured by Devon Alexander, stopping Junior Witter in 8. Gabe, they say it's a TKO in 3, but if you go by precedent of James Tony Hassan Rahman, I think if there is justice, this will be changed to a no decision, because it's absolutely clear that while Nate Campbell was having his problems with the young guy out of Palm Springs, the Desert Storm, it was clearly a clash of heads that caused the gash and eventually the fight to be stopped. But I will say this, after 9 minutes of action, I know that's early, this was Tim Bradley's fight.
Yeah, he came in, just full of energy. The arena was on fire, and he was matching it. And he kind of started as he usually does, a little bit slower, kind of seeing what Campbell was going to bring to the table, and then just slowly got momentum. Into the third, it seemed like he just exploded out of the corner and just really went for it, started attacking to the body, picking up on the momentum that he had at the end of the second. Steve, it's interesting. You've always talked about like a ref calling what he sees rather than what he thinks he sees. And Mendoza, while I disagree, I think the headbutt did cause the cut, and it was very clear on the replays that it was a pretty nasty headbutt. Immediately there wasn't any blood, and then there was a lot of action afterwards, and maybe the punch kind of got the blood going. It's hard to say, but I have to agree with you. I think it should have been a no contest. And here's the thing that I want out of a ref is consistency. And early in the fight, there was a couple of headbutts. These guys, just their styles dictated that. And the ref kept stopping them and warning them about the heads. But then the most egregious of all of them, the most blatant headbutt of all of them, and he didn't stop the action. Campbell even complained, and he just let it go. I think maybe the atmosphere or the hometown crowd kind of got the best of Mendoza here.
Yeah, I think David Mendoza was very spotty on this night, but I will say this. Referees are human. I don't think David Mendoza was corrupt, but I do think he made an error in judgment.
Yeah.
Going back to the fight, but you look at a lot of other sports, even baseball now, in certain instances with the fair or foul pole, if you want to call it that, is using instant replay. Football for years has used instant replay.
Yeah.
In specific cases like this, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world for boxing to get it right in a situation of was a guy hit by a punch or was he cut by a clash of heads, because I think there needs to be clarity. Now, looking at the fight itself, I know it was early, and we saw earlier this year where a young guy who's passionate, young, and energetic jumps out to a quick lead. But like the tortoise and the hare, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And you saw Juan Manuel Marquez catch up to Juan Diaz with this technical precision and his professionalism. Not saying it couldn't have happened on this night with Bradley and Campbell, but I just got the sense that Nate Campbell has turned the corner while Timothy Bradley is certainly in his physical prime.
I would agree with that. Campbell came out kind of a little bit listless. He looked like he was reaching, with the right. Kind of the signs were there.
Yeah.
The legs weren't quite there. The snap to his punches.
Reflexes.
The reflexes weren't quite there. And I think, towards the end of the second and really into the third, I thought maybe he was trying to play possum, laying on the ropes, but it was working against him. He was really absorbing everything that Bradley was throwing at him. And Bradley's the kind of guy that he isn't really a sharpshooter. He's kind of a guy that will take your shoulder, take the elbow, maybe hit you on the belt line. He just kind of hits you everywhere. And I think, Campbell, we saw him try to take the fight back out to center ring and really try to sharpshoot and counterpunch. And then Bradley just took right over again. I don't think that strategy was going to work.
Well, I think against Juan Diaz, Nate Campbell was able to bully Juan Diaz to a certain degree. Here's the thing about Tim Bradley. Physically, I always talk about fighters that couldn't be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness. Tim Bradley actually could be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness and fit right in. Physically, very, very strong. As well-conditioned as any athlete. Also, speed and quickness. I think he's a better athlete than the Baby Bull. And I also believe he had a little bit more versatility because Tim Bradley from the outside could jab and get in and out and also be very elusive. And I thought the early body shots, the early attack of the Desert Storm was going to start to pay dividends in the later rounds, Gabe.
And with every fight, this guy's impressive. I mean, he seems to tighten up his game and improve a little bit. And I like the way he was slipping under punches. His defense was nice. Like you said, he added the multiple jab and was kind of on his toes at times. And his hooks kind of tightened up. One big thing that I thought was going to be a factor was the way he kind of comes in head down and open for the uppercut. And Campbell landed a couple uppercuts early, and then Bradley adjusted and kind of got off to the side or kept that guard, kept one of his hands there to block it. I kind of just saw a stoppage loss for Campbell.
Yeah, taking a look at Nate Campbell, here's the thing. I think they will get justice because there is precedent going back to Rock Montoni, the California State Athletic Commission, to their credit, overturned a call that was a bad call last year, even though it made a lot of it made a lot of people upset because they felt as though that Hassan Rahman looked for a trap door. Here's the thing. Nate Campbell, once again, is going to scream bloody murder. Let's say they do get this changed to a no decision. Here's the thing, Gabe. That was not a mandatory defense. That was an optional defense.
Right.
Tim Bradley now has to fight Lamont Peterson, and they want to go big-name hunting. Even if they get this decision changed, they're not getting a rematch, Gabe. That's the bottom line, and I don't know what career options Nate Campbell really has at this stage.
No, he kind of outsmarted himself in this fight. He figured, it's before the fourth round. I've got this headbutt cut, and they're going to stop the fight. I'm going to get my rematch. And he forgot to think about the fact that, one, there's no rematch clause, and two, it's a voluntary defense. And, Campbell's not the kind of big name that the fans are going to say, look, this was inconclusive. We really need a rematch, and there's going to be a groundswell. What I thought was interesting about this was he came back to the corner, and the corner really just kind of let him dictate how this thing was going to go.
Absolutely.
They hadn't got a ruling yet. They didn't know if it was a punch or a headbutt. It took some time for that to come out. And here you let your fighter just start talking to the doctor and saying, I can't see, I've got spots, stop the fight. Where was, the corner to say, sit down, shut up, let me assess the damage, let's find out what the ruling is, and let's go from there. They just let chaos rule, and ultimately it cost their fighter.
I think too many fighters, and again, this is not an indictment on any individual fighter, but it is a culture now where fighters are now starting to be accountants, and they're starting to be kind of their own managers, thinking about it, making calculated decisions. That was very ironic that one of the men that Nate Campbell was honoring on that night was Arturo Gatti. You know how many fights Arturo Gatti must have fought where he couldn't see?
Yeah.
Could you imagine the reaction of a Carmen Basilio if a ring doctor came into his corner and said, Carmen, can you see? Do you remember that classic reaction from Jim Mora when they talked about playoffs where he's almost incredulous? I need to see more fighters react like Jim Mora and not say playoffs, but are you kidding me? Get the hell out of my corner. I got to fight because you know what? Boxing is about overcoming adversity
Absolutely.
and making illogical decisions that me or you simply don't have the guts to make. Because if every fighter complained about a physical ailment, then every fight should be stopped relatively early. The game of professional boxing is brutal. For a guy like Nate Campbell, when you make that type of decision, Gabe, you are not guaranteed tomorrow. You're certainly not guaranteed another fight against Tim Bradley.
No, and it's going to be a decision that he's going to have to live with for a long time. And, boxing fans are kind of fickle. And
kind of.
So are fight writers. And you're only as good as your last fight. And this is the way we're going to think of him for a while, is that here's a guy that became a businessman. Or, in the ring, he behaved like a fighter. In the corner, he kind of behaved like a corner man.
Well, here's the thing. One of the comments he made to me last week was he said that I'm willing to fight for my life. Is Tim Bradley willing to fight for his? I think that those comments and that quote now takes on a whole different context in light of what happened. Not that I necessarily blame Nate Campbell for what took place or his decisions, but again, he's not going to get a rematch, in my opinion, under any circumstances. Now, here's an interesting fight. Devon Alexander Jr. Witter. Here's what I think. Certainly not the most scintillating fight. Certainly not the most exciting fight. In other words, it was a Junior Witter fight. But I think based on the conditions he was set forth that were placed upon him, I thought Devon Alexander fought as well as expected.
Yeah, I think so. You almost kind of saw him grow up in this fight a little bit. He looked a little tight early, but he had a really nice game plan. He was just kind of shooting down the middle, shooting the straight left and the jab to the body and then kind of working back upstairs. He stayed very economical throughout the fight and really just stayed within himself, within his game plan. I thought towards the middle of the fight it became more of a Junior Witter fight, where it was getting ugly and there was a lot of clinches and Alexander went away from the jab, but then he kind of steeled himself and found the jab again and really started to put it on Witter as much as you can on an awkward fighter like Witter.
Gabe, here's one of the things about Junior Witter. He's very sneaky. He uses your own energy and momentum against you. He's a very, very sneaky and also powerful counterpuncher. I actually thought Devon Alexander did a nice job of feinting and drawing in Junior Witter and then countering him. The one time he really hurt him, he actually laid a trap himself on Junior Witter. I think Devon Alexander is a very solid mechanic. The one thing he doesn't have great thing in terms of like abundance of is power, but he makes up for it in overall physical tools, speed, quickness, and technical precision. And Junior Witter, listen, we've seen him a couple of times on American TV. Keep him in Britain. I'm sorry, the only time he was exciting this whole night was he did that somersault in the first round. The guy decided to call it a day, and usually I'm all against fighters quitting. This time I was completely for it. We were inside the arena. The crowd was getting very, very restless over this match.
Yeah, and you know, you look at the cards after the fight, and he'd only won 1 round on 2 of the judges' cards and no rounds on the other, the third card. I mean, he didn't really, bring the kind of arsenal that was going to turn the fight around. It was clear he'd landed a few flush shots, and Alexander barely blinked. It was just a no-win situation. And sometimes when you're 35 years old and the other guy's starting to put it on you a little bit more each round, maybe the best decision was to just end the fight.
Boxing's versions of a tap out. Take a look at the future. Devin Alexander is very lucky. He's one of the few African American fighters who I believe has a home base. St. Louis is a place that will support a fighter that is certainly from that area. Corey Spinks is a great example of that. If I'm making that first title defense, Devin Alexander against Nate Campbell in St. Louis at the Savage Center is not the worst promotion in the world.
No, I think that's an excellent fight for him. And it's the kind of fight that, looking at Campbell, coming in, I thought he was going to be the most dangerous guy that Bradley had ever faced. And now kind of looking at him, he looks like a 135-pounder moving up to 140. The power is not quite there. He's kind of getting on in years. But he still has a lot of skills. There's a toughness question there now with him kind of quitting early. But, he's a guy with a solid chin. He's going to be there all night. And he's the kind of guy that can give really good experience to Devin Alexander.
No, and one thing he brings is something very, very conventional. Nate Campbell is still a very good technician.
Yes.
He may not have the legs or the reflexes or the quickness to pull the trigger as he once did. But I think if you want to showcase Devin Alexander and make him into the new generation Corey Spinks, well, you don't want to fight another awkward guy or a fellow southpaw. You want to fight a guy that's going to sit in the pocket and give you angles that are much easier to deal with than Junior Witter. And guess what? Nate Campbell, even at 140 now, may still be the harder puncher than Devin Alexander.
Yeah.
So there are elements of this fight. You know what? This fight could be interesting, but I think you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I think in terms of Devin Alexander, you get a good name on the belt, a notch on the belt. You bring him back home with a recognizable foe. And for Nate Campbell, I'm sick of the complaining to a certain degree when it comes to Nate Campbell.
Absolutely.
The time has come where the rhetoric now is getting a little bit old. I've heard it before. And the one thing that Nate Campbell said that was very interesting to me is, I have never complained about a decision. I have to completely disagree. Nate Campbell disagreed and complained about every single decision. So to placate him and his people, I think that's the fairest way to go. And it's a relatively easy fight to make if there are no WBC requirements, because they are both with Don King.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, they're the same promoter, and it's a nice matchup, like you said. It's the kind of fight that you want to build your fighter with. And Nate Campbell is the kind of guy that if you sleep on him or you lose some focus, as Alexander did in the middle rounds against Witter, he could take you out.
Yeah, and we still have not seen Devin Alexander take one on the whiskers, and all it takes is one good Galaxy Warrior right hand. Well, that's it for round number 1 of the next round. We come back, we go to news and notes. Moving on with the next round, Steve, Kim, Gabriel Montoya talking boxing. We go to news and notes, and we have a heavyweight staple just a few blocks from here. September 26th for the WBC heavyweight title of the world. Vitaly Klitschko will defend against Chris Arreola. I don't know about you. I love Chris Arreola. I'm a good friend of Henry Ramirez, the trainer. We get along with Dan Goosen. Here's the thing about Chris Arreola. I still don't know if he has beaten a legitimate top 10 heavyweight. I have questions about his discipline. I have questions about his overall resume. Are they cashing in or are they cashing out?
Ooh, yeah. I think it's a bit of cashing in, and to answer your question about top 10 heavyweight, no, he hasn't. He's beaten some good prospects. I mean, Chaz Witherspoon I thought was a very good win. The Walker win was a good win. He hasn't really done much, but it's a dangerous guy with a lot of power, and he tested not only Arreola's chin, which he dropped him, but we found out about Arreola's will and ability to get up off the canvas and keep going. The problem with Arreola's resume is that, he fought Jameel McCline, who's more like Jameel Decline at this point. And, but he's 6'6", but he doesn't fight at all like Vitaly Klitschko. And nobody on Arreola's resume does fight like Vitaly Klitschko. So, personally, I don't think he's ready. I don't think he's shown that he can be consistent in his conditioning. Yeah, he still throws a lot of punches, and yeah, he is undefeated. But I haven't seen him put on the kind of performance that he's going to need to do against Vitaly Klitschko. He's got to fight a perfect fight.
Gabe, we have not seen him since April, and I do understand at this stage of the game, once you get to HBO, you're not going to be fighting 5-6 times a year. But I've heard from very good sources. I've also seen it with my own eyeballs. He's not exactly Bernard Hopkins when it comes to out-of-the-ring discipline. Does not exactly live the Spartan lifestyle. And he's going to be around 280, 285 by the time camp starts. I know they're trying to get into shape now. They have hired Daryl Hudson, noted strength and conditioning coach, best known for working with Shane Mosley and Winky Wright and Layman Brewster. But I have a concern that there are certain camps that you actually work on boxing. There are other camps you just work on losing weight. Usually when you work on the latter, that usually leads to a defeat. And the one thing about Vitaly Klitschko, say what you want about either brother, they can control you from the outside with that left hand. And I think Vitaly Klitschko is very, very tough, and he's very, very awkward. I just don't know, for as heavy-handed as the nightmare is, can he close the gap on the inside, get inside the reach, and be able to move his hands? That's the question that I have.
You know, and here's the thing too: is that Ariel is getting a following. He's out from he's from Riverside, which is near Los Angeles. But it would have been nice if they'd have brought Vitaly maybe back to the States and had them both fight on a card where we kind of build up to this fight. It doesn't really have, maybe for fight fans it has a lot of heat. For Klitschko, the European fans, it has a lot of heat. But, Ariel is not exactly a household name.
Well, that's another thing. They have not really built Areola. I remember last year, Thanksgiving weekend, they fought Travis Walker out there in Ontario, and Dan Goossen went on this thing about we're going to build Areola, we're going to keep him busy. I think they have failed on both accounts.
Absolutely.
September 26th, a couple of blocks from the Staples Center at the Coliseum, USC plays Washington State. There are some people who don't know which will be a bigger blowout, the SC game or the Klitschko-Areola fight. I think it is absolutely paramount. If you're Chris Areola, you got to get out of the first 4 rounds relatively unscathed and then try to go from there. I think that's the key to the fight.
And I think also just kind of pushing the pace of the fight. And, they hired Daryl Hudson to get him in shape, and I think they would have been better served to, one, put them on the same card and kind of build the fight, but two, to kind of test drive, this version of Areola that's going to be working under Hudson. Get him down in weight, like you said, rather than making this camp about losing 40 pounds or 30 pounds, you're probably going to come in the 250s.
Yes.
Make it about kind of fine-tuning him and leading into the Klitschko fight. This way, it just seems kind of like Russian roulette. We'll see what happens.
Gabe, you can say a lot of things about the Klitschkos, that they're boring, they're safety first, they're cautious. Here's the thing you can't say about them, that they don't win fights.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, by stink or whatever, they win fights.
They're consistent as well.
And they're effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And Klitschko, Vitaly, the older one, is a serious veteran. He knows exactly how to fight tall, play to his strengths. He fights very tall, keeps his head away, uses that jab. He uses a little more movement than he used to now that he's getting older. I mean, he hasn't really been tested. There was something that Henry Ramirez was telling me this weekend, that no one's really pushed the pace on him. A lot of guys just sit there and get jabbed to death. And there's a reason for that. I don't think people come in with a game plan saying, well, I'm going to let him throw 1,000 jabs and eventually he'll tire. The guy's got a great jab, and he knows how to keep range. He knows how to keep you at bay. And I just wonder that, if Chris is going to come out fast and hard, if after those 3-4 rounds, maybe he's unscathed, but he could be tired as hell, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking a look at the fight review, Friday Night Fights, Victor Cayo goes to 23-0, decisioning Julio Diaz. On Showbox, good night of action here. Lightweight, Tyrone Harris pulls the upset, stopping Marvin Quintero in 8. And then bantamweight, Chris Avila remains undefeated to KO2 over Andre Wilson. And Saturday night, for the vacant IBF welterweight title, Isaac Lachayo split decision in 12 over Delvin Rodriguez. I think it's clear for Julio Diaz. The sell-by date has now passed. It is time for him to call it a day.
Yeah, he definitely, the time is now. His body looked bad. His legs looked worse. The speed and the snap wasn't quite there, and he just kept getting buzzed. And his opponent wasn't really that big of a hitter. It didn't seem like, and he's not the kind of guy that really kind of sits down and puts it on you. But he got buzzed like 3-4 times in the fight, and it just looked like a guy ready to retire.
Gabe, even when he was really a hot young prospect, or right in the prime of his career, he always looked flimsy.
Yeah.
He never looked strong in the legs, never looked like he had a strong foundation, didn't have a lot of physical strength.
No.
And now that the fact he's certainly turned the corner, that is exacerbated. I could only see it going even more downhill for the kid Julio Diaz. Good night of action on Showbox. I tell you what, Harris Quintero, out of all the fights that we look forward to this weekend, this was the fight that had the best two-way action, and Tyrone Harris got blown out by Urbano Antillon back in May.
Yeah.
He could not take the body shots. And I tell you, Quintero was a pretty good action fighter, but I got to give Harris credit. Speed and the fact that he was quick and he was fast, and he ended up just overwhelming Marvin Quintero with the overall bulk of his punches.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of came out strong, and I guess the knock on him, and he'd been a bit of a front runner, And it seemed like he'd kind of learned from that. He learned from his losses. He kept range really well, kind of shot his straight shots right down the pipe. And then he would kind of back off a little bit and just box and kind of meted out his energy throughout the fight. And he started to not fade, but bend a little bit late. And then that ending, he just came back, a nice right hook. It was just a beautiful finish to the fight. It was probably the best fight of the weekend, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And also, opening up this broadcast, Chris Avalos remains undefeated, this young banger. I tell you what, he's a fun guy to watch, but I do have question marks. He looks a little bit bulky and stiff in the upper body. That's the one question I have. How is he going to deal with a real good upright boxer that could jab from the outside?
Yeah, he was having a lot of problems in the first round with the movement of his opponent, and then in the second round, it just seemed like Wilson decided to stay in front of him a little bit too long. It was more about what the mistakes that he made as opposed to the adjustments that Avalos made to get to him. But when he got his opponent hurt, the thing that I really liked was that he finished him very well. He jumped right all over him.
And you cannot teach power, and certainly Avalos has strength and power in abundance. Delvin Rodriguez, I think it's clear he's just not a world-class guy.
No.
He's a good fighter. He's an ESPN2 level fighter. Makes for good TV. But if you are a prime-time world-class welterweight, you beat Isaac Lutshayo on your home turf.
Yeah, definitely beat him on your home turf. And with all the belts that are out there, if you can't win one against Isaac Lutshayo, then yeah, you probably aren't a world-class guy.
Yeah, now there's talk of him fighting Andre Berto, and Andre Berto must be the most fortunate man in HBO history because Isaac Lutshayo is a solid guy, he's a decent guy, but I kind of look at him as a blown-up 35, 40-pounder that's also awfully tall, got some size to him, but I don't really look at him as a marquee welterweight. And once again, you could make the argument, has Andre Berto faced a good welterweight, even if he should unify this belt against Isaac Lutshayo?
Colazzo, that's about it.
Yeah,
but he won't face him again, and it's still, like Chad Dawson, who's now, going to take on Glenn Johnson in a rematch to clear up, their first fight. I still think that's the fight that Andre Berto needs to make.
Taking a look at the fight preview, Friday Night Fights, Alfred Angulo takes on Gabriel Rosado. Saturday in Argentina, Jorge Barrios takes on Moises Castro. And in Atlantic City, Mike Jones takes on late replacement Lenin Arroyo. Going back up top, Angulo had that disappointing loss to Kermit Citron back several months ago. I'm telling you what, this may be a tune-up. I think it's a tough tune-up. Gabriel Rosado's going to go rounds. I think he will push Pedro Angulo.
Yeah, he's a tough Philly fighter. He just upset, Kasim Uma, who's, definitely past it, but that's still a solid win. He's a tall guy, and 6 feet. He's rangy, and he likes to box a little bit. Angulo's, we ran into him this weekend at the fights. He seemed very focused, not quite as happy, and smiley as he normally is when you see him at the fights. I think it was kind of a bit of a blow to him to lose that fight, lose all that momentum that HBO had behind him. The hype train was going full steam right coming into the Cintron fight. Now he's fighting on Friday Night Fights for a little less money, and he's got to work his way back. Okay, a lot less money, and he's got to work his way back up. I'm really curious about this matchup. I ran into a fan this weekend that told me that Alfred Angulo is the truth, and we're going to find out.
I think the truth is this. Good puncher, good banger, exciting, movement's going to give him problems.
Yeah.
I think that's the truth about Alfred Angulo.
Absolutely, that's the truth.
Because when you make Kermit Citron look like a stick-and-move specialist, like if he was a Vernon Forrest in his prime, that says a lot about your foot speed or your lack of ability to cut off the ring.
Yeah.
Rosado is tough, though. He's one of these guys who does not act like an opponent. I know more than one matchmaker believes that this is going to be a grind-em-out fight. I don't know if you've been able to see him yet, Gabe, but I like Mike Jones out of Philadelphia. Big, tall welterweight, rangy, can really punch. For some reason, whether it's his promoter, whether he is not connected to the right people, but I think Mike Jones, I know there may be a little bit of a question mark as to whether he could take a punch, but I think Mike Jones, if you give him the chance, if there's a stock I would buy big into Mike Jones.
Oh, big time. No, I was watching a lot of tape of him this week. This guy is all action. He's a rangy guy. He knows how to use his distance. He's got a nice mid-range game, and he's got good power and speed, man. I don't understand why people aren't talking more about this guy. Maybe it's because he's not on TV. He's kind of one of the better-kept secrets in the welterweight division.
He's actually had more fights on Max TV than regular TV. No offense to us, but you kind of need to be out there on some of the bigger networks, though. But I think next year, hopefully, he'll break through. I think this kid has a lot of talent. Taking a look, we wrap it up with tidbits. September 12th, Showbox doubleheader. Mikkel Kessler and Andre Ward to co-headline before they face each other in November. Then that same day, Latin Fury, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., he will headline against Jason LaHoulier. Then October 10th, another Latin Fury takes place. The main event, Juanma Lopez versus Rogers Matagua from the theater. of Madison Square Garden. Kessler and Ward, you know I'm a big college football fan. In September, before all the big teams like Florida, Oklahoma, USC, before they get into the conference play, they play like Eastern, North Tech, they play DeVry. I think that, I tell you what, you could say with Andre Ward that, yeah, he needs a tune-up. Shelby Pudwell, I've seen tune-ups. That's not even an oil change. That's not even filling up the gas tank. Now, I can understand with Kessler taking on Guzman Padromo, who is his WBA mandatory. He hasn't fought since last October.
He needs it, yeah.
But I better not see a clash of heads on either fight here, because there is an element of risk that could jeopardize a fight in November.
It is pretty dangerous. You know, the one thing I'll say about it is that it's good that they're putting these guys on the same card and kind of giving a little bit more, you know, heat to the Super Six by, you know, showcasing these guys and saying, look, these two guys are going to fight, putting them in showcase bouts where maybe we get some highlight reel knockouts or, you know, some good action. But it's very dangerous with, you know, the Super Six tournament hasn't begun. Everybody's looking forward to it, and you're putting two of your first guys in a fight. I'm kind of a little wary about this.
If there's ever two fights I want to see in real fights in pros where the guys actually wear headgear, maybe this is the one. Gabe, September 5th was the original date of Chavez-Lahoulier, the rescheduling of the fight that was supposed to take place last week. Boy, I'd say that's real great at Top Rank to give this kid an extra week not to train.
Yeah, just call me when I'm supposed to care. You know, I think it was last year before a Cotto fight. No, before it was Manny Pacquiao Marquez. So it was even longer than that. Bob Arum said, you know, by the end of 2009, we'll know if Julio Cesar Chavez is a fighter. Well, you know, it's midway through, and
that'll be 2009, 10, 11, and 12. It'll be like a campaign speech, and I'm sorry, the word I was looking for was enabler. Yeah. Someone's got to sit this kid down. He makes a lot of money, and let's face it, he's one of the few fighters that grew up wearing silk pajamas. He had the Xbox. He probably had a nicer car than any of us drive at age 16. Yeah. And I just don't see the discipline. You look at his body, it looks very, very soft. And I don't know if there comes a point. I knew that the first 30 fights were on the house. That was his amateur career.
Yeah, absolutely.
This next 10 fights, you up it. I'm not so sure they've upped their competition in the last dozen or so fights. I mean, he struggled with Matt Vanda. Yeah. You should not struggle with Matt Vanda if you're a prospect at any stage, as far as I'm concerned.
And Steve, they're running out of white guys with tattoos from the Midwest to put him in against. Yeah. You know, I mean, the guy's got more, you know, fighters from the Midwest on his record than fighters from the Midwest. It's just getting kind of ridiculous at this point. And you know, they're putting him on pay-per-view, and people are buying it because he's the name, and there's the nostalgia factor. But at some point, you know, we got to find out what he really has, and maybe at this point we have, when he's going life and death with, you know, third-rate fighters.
Here's a guy on Latin Fury that's the real deal, Juanma Lopez. And I'll say this, Roger Matagua may be worn, but he had that incredible war last year on Telefutura against Tomas Villa, which is an incredible fight and an incredible finish. Here's the thing, I don't think Matagua has a shot at this fight, but I think it'll be a much more pleasing fight because of his style and temperament than Oliver Lonke.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's going to come forward. He's a resilient guy. He carries his power late. He is dangerous. If you know, Juanma, he kind of tired a little bit in the Penalosa fight, throwing, you know, a million punches, and started getting countered on the inside. And you know, Matagua is not a guy that's going to show up to be an opponent. He's going to come to win. You know, maybe he is a little shop-worn, but it's an intriguing matchup. He's got a longer reach than Juanma and a come-forward style. I'd like to see it.
Yes, so that's it for this week's edition of TNR on behalf of Gabriel Montoya and the rest of Max Boxing. Until the next round, goodbye, everybody.